Hola YouTube, what is up? We are back in the car on the road. Today is the day. It's finally here. Actually, day before yesterday was the day, but I've been very, very busy this week. And if you have seen my other vlog, which might actually come out after this one, we'll see. But when you see my other vlog, you'll understand why. But Dune has finally, after the long, long wait, been released into theaters, and I am journeying to the nearest IMAX screen to see Denis' vision of Dune. It almost doesn't feel real. It's like I am excited, but the palpable excitement I had, like when each trailer came out and getting news about this production, like the level of excitement I'm feeling right now is very subdued in comparison to that. And I think it's because it has taken so long to get to this point that it's almost unreal to me. I don't know how else to describe it. It's almost like I don't really believe that I'm about to see Dune. I kind of have that, like, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it kind of feeling. So I don't know. Reviews right now are very mixed, especially in like a lot of the Dune forums and stuff I'm in online. I'm trying to avoid as much as I can, even though, like, you know, what are they going to spoil? I've read the book 3 times. The book's been around for 50-something years. Like, I just don't want anybody else's opinion informing what I think. I'm going into this very open-minded. Even with that said, you already know, if you've been watching my other Dune content on this channel, that I think that this movie is perfectly cast. I think from top to bottom, every member of the production crew, they've chosen the exact right people to bring Frank Herbert's novel to life. I still, even as I'm talking about it, I don't feel like it's real. I will definitely get back to you with my thoughts after the film. It would be really cool if it was light enough out when I leave to record my thoughts on the drive home, but I highly doubt that we'll still have this much sun. I'm going to a 4 o'clock showing, so it probably ends around like 6:37, maybe even 7:30. I forget the runtime of this film. It is a cloudy, muggy, and rainy day in Florida, which is perfect because I will soon be leaving these moist lands to view the bountiful, sun-filled desert of Arrakis. Okay, maybe it is starting to set in. All right, I'll holler back at you after the movie. Peace and love. The spice must flow. All right, folks. So here's my official first reaction. The first act is a mess. I hate that that's the first thing I have to say, because the rest of the movie's fantastic. But the first, like, 30 some odd minutes feel very disjointed. There are important things that are not addressed or underexplained. Meanwhile, some other things that don't require an explanation are over-explained in the first act. Also, 2 of my favorite moments from the book are missing, and they would be easy additions, and I feel like they were probably cut for runtime. So I expect that there's probably an extended cut on the way. which I would love to see. Otherwise, that movie was fucking fantastic. And that's just my initial gut response. So to sum that up, the first act is a mess. The rest of the movie is damn near perfect. And we're missing two of my favorite scenes, but that's okay. And I do believe that there will be an extended cut. There were also some lines from the trailers that didn't make it into this finished film. In the trailer, Gaius Helen Mohim says to Paul, your father is losing his planet. And Paul replies, he's getting a richer one. And the Reverend Mother replies, he'll lose that too. I don't know why that was cut. I just said it right now. It's like 20 seconds. And I feel like that exchange does drive home the point that everybody knows that the Atreides are walking into a trap. I'm going to roll this over a couple times. Maybe I'll give it a rewatch when I get home, because I could definitely sit through that again. So maybe tomorrow I'll jump in here with some more of my thoughts, but those are my first impressions just now leaving the theater. Who knows, I may even be thinking something completely different by the time I get home. We shall see. All right, y'all. So I already hit you with the first impressions. Today is Wednesday, so I've been busy, which is why I couldn't do this earlier, but I've mulled the movie over in my head for a couple days, and now I'm going to share with you some of the finer points of my thoughts. So spoiler free, all I can really say is that I really loved it. Like, with one glaring exception, I thought all of the design elements were fantastic. I thought it was perfectly cast, perfectly acted, and I'll get more into character by character, because this series is built on its characters. I thought the score was great. I love all the Eastern influence in the music. That was really important to me, because there's a lot of Eastern influence in Dune that can easily get overshadowed when you're adapting it for like this kind of Hollywood style filmmaking. I thought the fight scenes and the battle scenes looked cool, but they could have gone a little bit bigger with some things, especially in like the style of knife fighting, that kind of stuff. Fans of the actual book are all, it seems to me we all have the same complaint, is that this version lost a little bit of Dune's weirdness. That is what makes it so captivating and unique. And I'm not saying it wasn't weird at all. In fact, my mom watched it, and she's more of a normie than me, and she thought it was really super weird. So if they had gone weirder with it, if they had gone to what Dune fans come to expect from Dune, it would have been too weird for some people. The fantastic news is that yesterday we found out that over the weekend this film did in fact do well enough at the box office that we are getting a sequel in 2023. So thank you. Bless the maker and his water. Shai Hulud is pleased. So with that said, I'm going to jump into some more spoilery things right now. And I'll just say, I'm seeing a lot of people online that are fans of the David Lynch 84 film saying that that film is better. And look, it's fine to prefer one film over another. All I'm going to say is that in my opinion, is my personal opinion, the 84 film, and don't get me wrong, I absolutely adore David Lynch. He is easily my third favorite director of all time. Like, it's Kubrick, Gilliam, Lynch. Like, I love every other David Lynch movie. Dune is the one outlier. It is his only artistic failure. And don't get me wrong, there are things in it to love. I love the way the still suits look. I love the way the worms look in the Lynch version. Kyle MacLachlan gives a fine performance, but he's tragically miscast. And full disclosure, huge Lynch fan. I acknowledge that so Kyle MacLachlan was actually cast by the producers of the Lynch film, Dino De Laurentiis and his daughter. So David Lynch didn't pick Kyle, but they got along so well that he used him for Blue Velvet, and then he used him in Twin Peaks. And Twin Peaks is one of my favorite shows of all time. And it's absolutely because of Kyle MacLachlan's endearing performance as Agent Dale Cooper. So, yes, I'm thankful that we had Kyle MacLachlan playing Paul Atreides in the 84 Dune, only because that gave us Twin Peaks. I love me some Agent Dale Cooper, but in Dune, he is horribly miscast. Like, he has a good look for an older Paul Atreides, and it's one of those weird things. Like, Kyle MacLachlan, at the time that they filmed the 80s Dune, is like 21 or 22, but dude looks 30 to me. And he's trying to play a 15-year-old. Timothée Chalamet is actually like 20-ish. He's roughly the same age that Kyle MacLachlan was. But he looks 12. So he comes off as a teenager in this film, and it works. Yes, I still think that the first act of this film, everything that we see on Caladan, is a mess. It's all out of order. There's reverence paid to a lot of things that don't really get a payoff. And some things that don't really need to be explained are over-explained. However, some things that require a little bit of explanation, a little bit of setup so that we can understand this world, are completely glossed over. And I understand the reason for that. It's because exposition is weird. And the Lynch film absolutely has way too much exposition. Like, not only do we get a voiceover setup from Virginia Madsen, the entire Emperor scene that comes right after it is exposition. And then when we see Paul studying his film books, that's all exposition too. So like the first 30-something minutes of the 84 Dune is all exposition. And then on top of that, yes, Frank Herbert was very focused on characters' internal monologue, their thoughts, their motivations, why they're doing what they're doing. But the 84 film literally just has you can hear the character's thoughts. It's like a whisper. You hear a voiceover whisper, and that's what that character is thinking right then. And it's very cheesy. And that's like the big criticism that all the people who are championing the 84 film right now are not acknowledging, is how cheesy and silly and like nonsensical the 84 film is. I give this film credit for taking the source material seriously, for paying not just... It's not paying homage, it's something else. There's a better word for it. But there are so many little details in this film that are there to do the main themes of the book justice. And I do appreciate that they split this book up into two films, because Dune is dense, and this first book is pretty massive. And when you try to rush to the end, like the 84 film did, it doesn't feel cohesive. Like the 84 film has this chaotic sporadicness to it, because things are happening so fast that you don't get time to process them. This film takes it at a much slower pace, and I love that. But it still left a lot of things out. But I'll get back to that later. So now we're going to get deep into spoiler stuff here. Basically, my biggest problems with this film is where it deviates from the book. And I saw a lot of people complaining like, oh, they added too much stuff in. I don't think they did. I didn't see a lot of things that like got added in where I was like, oh, that's not in the book and I don't like that. Nothing struck me that way. The things that struck me were the things that got left out that I thought are important to the world building. And my number one biggest problem is the voice. And this is a problem in every single adaptation of Dune, is that, oh, the voice has to sound weird. It's this superpower. You know, it's like, oh, they can control people with the power of their voice. And they make it almost like a magical special ability. It's not. It's really just being charismatic. That's what the voice is. And that plays into a major theme of the book about the danger of charismatic leaders. Paul Atreides can influence people with his voice because he can read people. He understands their psychology. And he can, like almost how a car dealer can figure out your annual salary by like looking for 2 or 3 key details about the way you dress or the way you carry yourself. It's just like that. It's Paul and the Bene Gesserits, because this is a skill he learned from his mom, who trained him. He can read people so well, and he has such control over his own personage and his tone of voice that he can influence others' decisions so well that it's almost as if he can make people do things that they should be unwilling to do, like take off his mother's gag in the helicopter scene or the thopter scene. You know what I'm talking about. Another big problem, and this is once again a big problem with the first act, is that you don't really feel the tension that the book has. And I really think that this is an editing problem, especially because there were lines in the trailers, and I mentioned this in the car, there were lines in the trailer that didn't make it to the final cut. And those lines like really drive home the point that everybody knows this is a trap. Everybody knows that this is a trap. It's the worst kept secret in the universe. It's a worse kept secret than CM Punk's debut in All Elite Wrestling. It's a worse kept secret than Batman's secret identity. Everybody knows, including Leto, including Paul, even though Paul's trying to not think about it, he knows it. Jessica, the Bene Gesserit, everybody knows that the Atreides are going into a death trap. Everybody knows that Leto is going to die. And the cinematography plays into that theme by repeatedly showing the bull's head. And they talked a little bit about this, but they didn't outright say that Duke Leto's father died fighting a bull. In fact, fighting that bull, the head that we keep seeing, that's the head of the bull that killed the previous Duke. And that image of the bullfighter to Paul and to Leto are absolutely signs of impending death. So I felt that if they spent the first act of the movie playing up that everybody knows this is a trap, that everybody knows that there's a traitor in House Atreides, that would help build the tension. Because as you're reading the book, they give away really early on who the traitor is. but you still have this tension because everybody else is trying to figure it out. They know that there's a traitor, they don't know who it is. So all of the main characters are like kind of starting to distrust one another. And that builds a wonderful sense of tension that is really lost in this version of the film. And once again, I chalk that up to editing. Once again, doesn't make it a bad movie. It's just an element that got lost. Also, this is the one design thing I have a nitpick with. I thought that the Atreides palace on Caladan really just looked like a cave. And considering that they're going into a cave when they get to Arrakis, I thought that the palace on Caladan should have looked a lot more like a palace. And yes, it's described briefly in the book. There's a lot of stone. But I thought that, and I understand that they're packing all their things to travel to Arrakis, and they're taking all their personal effects. But even so, I thought that Caladan could have been made to look a little bit more modern, I guess, or even futuristic, to drive home the point that these people are royalty, that they live a very privileged life, even though Duke Leto has an understanding of how important it is to not be as gaudy and what's the word? I guess ego-driven as the Baron Harkonnen. He is still a duke, and he lives like a duke. Treats his people well, but he does still live a life of privilege. Feel like we missed out on how much people don't trust the Bene Gesserit. We get from Paul that the Bene Gesserit are like influencing galactic politics behind the scenes. And that's absolutely prevalent, but more importantly, people don't trust them. People call them witches. They think that they do have supernatural powers, and it's really because they don't understand what the Bene Gesserit stand for, what they're trying to do. They just know that all the great houses have these women priestesses hanging out with them, speaking in riddles and whispers behind the scenes. We don't get that a lot of people don't trust the Bene Gesserit and see them as troublemakers or witches. Because, they are a religious order, but they're not. You know what I mean? A lot of my upcoming criticism goes back to the whole exposition thing. They showed us, and there's that phrase in film, show don't tell. They showed us what a mentat is, but we never heard the word mentat. And if you're looking for the details, you see the little stain on the lip of Thiffer and of Piter. You see them both roll their eyes into the back of their head as they're doing computations, which I thought was awesome. It was a great little touch. But it would have been nice to just get a little bit more of an expository setup, because even after watching it, I asked my mom if she got that those dudes were like human computers. And she was like, no. So to explain it for anyone who doesn't know, a mentat is a human. It's no like cyborg or android thing. I did see a couple people who were like, oh, they're robots that look like humans. That's not the case. They're human. But they have trained their minds to work as well and as fast as a computer. So much so that a couple of times it said that they almost border on prescience, which they don't. They can't see the future, but they can compute things really well and accurately because their minds are trained so well. And certain people are able to do this, and something that we lose, it's a scene in the book, but it's not mentioned in the film, and I absolutely think it helps to understand what makes Paul so special, is that Paul, he's only 15, so he can't be trained yet, but they make it clear that he has the potential to become a mentat. And it's one of those things. If Paul chooses to not take the dukedom, he could have a career as a mentat if he wants. I mean, obviously, events transpire that make that not a thing, but he could do that. One thing that I wanted to bring up that I thought they handled really well is the hand signs and like the secret languages, and the fact that, everyone kind of speaks this common tongue, but at the same time, like, the Fremen have an old language that Jessica knows because it's similar to a secret Bene Gesserit language. The Atreides army have their battle language. The Harkonnens, the Sardaukar, all have their own language. And then there's the hand signals. And God, I hope that in part 2 we get the character of Count Fenring, because Count Fenring and Lady Margot, even though they're like really small characters, they're just so cool. And there's a scene, alright, so spoilers for part 2, hopefully they'll put this scene in. They probably won't, but I hope that they put this scene in. Count Fenring and Lady Margot go to Baron Harkonnen to try and figure out what happened to the Atreides. And they're having a conversation with the Baron. And the Baron keeps thinking, why is this lady giggling all weird? Is she like on something? Or she has like a sixth sense of humor? Like, what's up with her? And actually, Lady Margot and Count Fenring are communicating through a secret code in their giggles. And they're just so cool. I really hope that they make it into part 2. And it would be kind of dope if Kyle MacLachlan played Count Fenring, because he is actually age appropriate for that part. I guess this kind of relates to the whole show don't tell thing. We got an explanation of what the Missionera Protectiva is, and they never mention the Missionera Protectiva. And that's the idea that these legends and traditions have been installed purposefully by the Bene Gesserit on every planet, so that if a Bene Gesserit is stranded on an unfriendly planet, she can use her knowledge of the local customs and traditions and languages and superstitions to their advantage, so that they can survive and get back to a friendly planet. So we got an explanation of that this is a thing that's been happening in the universe for centuries, but it was never called what it is, the Missionera Protectiva. And that's just one of those little details, like, why not mention it? Why not just insert one line? This is our Missionera Protectiva, that we do this. It could have been done, and I kind of get the reason that they didn't do that, but I say go for it. They should have gone all the way there with that idea. A lot of people over the past few days have been looking at the little spider dude in the Baron's office that they trot out while he's meeting with Gaius Helen Mohiam, and nobody knows what it is. It's not something from the book. A lot of people said maybe it's Dr. Yue's wife, and she's been transformed into this weird spider, but like they wouldn't, even if that was a thing that they could do, which I don't think they can, would they bring that person out while a Reverend Mother is there? I don't think so, because they have that intuition. She would go, oh shit, that's one of my ladies. what they do to her, this is messed up, and it's not gonna go well for the Baron. So I don't think that that's what that was. It's not a chair dog, which is something that they have in the book. My personal theory, sex spider. Spider definitely had a butthole. I think it's for sex. I think it's a sex thing. I think the Baron is having sex with that spider thing. It's just my theory. When the Shout-Out Mapes gives Jessica the crysknife, or shows Jessica the crysknife, I don't remember if she actually gives it to her. When she sheathed it without blooding the blade. And for those who've never read the book, it is, in the Fremen tradition, it is a sin to unsheathe your blade and not draw blood. Now, the reason they do this is to teach the Fremen control. You don't whip out your sword at any little threat. This is a philosophy that I think some modern institutions could learn from. You know, just whip out your shit anytime you think that something might be amiss. So when Shout-Out Mapes put the blade back in the sheath, I said out loud in the theater, "Wait, she didn't blood the blade!" And of course everybody was looking at me weird. On a side note, my theater was very, very quiet. It, like, for the whole 3 hours, it was a really quiet ride. And the only time that there was a real audience reaction, what was the audience reaction? I can't remember. But the audience that I watched Dune with was very quiet most of the time, except for, like, there were two instances. There was one laugh and one gasp, and I don't remember what they are. I'm pretty sure when I watch the film again, I will remember what they were, but right now I just can't think of it. So yeah, it was a pretty quiet ride. I could have let it go. I could have said, okay, we're just not doing that in this version of Dune. Except that later on, when Paul and Jessica get taken in by the Fremen and they have their knives drawn, they made it a point to show each one of them giving themselves a little nick on their wrist to blood the blade before they put it away. So they made such a big point of doing it at the end of the film. Why did we have to lose that moment? And it also helps build Jessica's character when she says to Mapes, like, wait a second, you can't put your knife away. You didn't blood your blade. And it keys the audience in to that Jessica knows the Fremen traditions, even though she's never been to Arrakis before. I felt that the audience could have used some explanation of why the Harkonnens and Atreides are at odds. You know, and that's something that, like, a lot of the main players in the Atreides house have personal gripes against the Harkonnens. On a side note, all of the pronunciations didn't bother me, and there's some people complaining, it's Harkonnen, not Harkonnen. I don't care. Like, I've heard it said so many different ways that it all just kind of blends together for me. Another change from the book was Liet's death. And I absolutely get why you can't do Liet's death the way that it's written in the book in this movie, because I think the Sci-Fi miniseries actually did it really well. If you take that one scene out of the rest of the miniseries and put it by itself, it's really cool. But in the context of the miniseries, it does bring the story to a screeching halt. And basically, it's just ironic to have the planet ecologist become a victim of the very planet that they study. And Liet has that internal monologue and that realization and that hope and dream for the future of Arrakis. It's a beautiful scene, but I understand why it can't go in this movie. With that said, like, it was kind of cool that she sacrifices herself in the movie for the Atreides, so that Paul and Jessica can get away. But as a super nerd and a fan of the book, I kind of miss the way that Kynes goes in the book. Paul, Timothée Chalamet nailed it. He's great. Like, he looks young for his age, so you buy that he's a teenager with like a heightened sense of awareness. He's engaging. He's someone you want to see grow. Kind of stole the show. Jason Momoa is Duncan Idaho. He's easily the most likable character, and that's really because Jason Momoa is just such a he's such a likable guy, and he's just kind of playing himself. The things that we lost in Duncan's character is that he's a womanizer. Like, I got no other way to say it. Duncan fucks a lot. He's dedicated and loyal to the Atreides. He loves what he does. He is one of the greatest warriors. He's the sword master of Leto's army. And we get all that. But he is also this suave, like, womanizing dude. And that was lost a little bit, but the bigger thing is that he doesn't trust Jessica. So he loves Leto, he loves Paul, but he's a little weary of Jessica. And there's a scene in the book where Duncan is drunk. Like, he went out with a couple of the soldiers and they drank a lot of spice beer, and he is shit-faced. And he accuses Jessica of being the traitor. So when he catches up with them later, and he and Liet bring Paul and Jessica to, you know, that safe house that turns out not to be safe, he has a moment with Jessica where he's like, I am so sorry that I doubted you. And like, it just adds more to his character. Oscar Isaac as Duke Leto, man, nailed it. I got nothing else to say. He nailed it. The only thing that they left out was there's a scene in the book that I love where they're getting shit together on Arrakis, and Leto's like going around, he's giving orders, he's giving instructions, he's popping pills to stay awake, he's overseeing this, he's looking into this, he's telling people to go here, go there, and he goes into an elevator and he has like 5 seconds to himself for the first time in days, and he's just like, oh man, I can't take it. And that moment, like, for me, really cements why the house falls the way it does. Because they said in this version, oh, I thought there'd be more time. So, Leto knows that it's coming, and he knows it's coming soon. On top of that, he's just been run ragged trying to get everything ready before this attack comes, because everybody knows it's coming. Jessica, I thought Rebecca Ferguson did a great job. She's the one out of the cast who's getting the most shit, I feel. And it's not all warranted. Jessica is a great character, and she was a strong character. And I don't feel that Rebecca Ferguson was playing her more mild on purpose. I think that what she was going for was a more reserved strength. Is Jessica's a badass, but she's also a master manipulator. She's a master poker player, you know? And a lot of her strength, especially in the first half, comes from like sitting back and watching situations. So without her internal monologue, she might seem weak and frail, or too regal or ladylike or whatever. And I don't think that that's what Rebecca and Denis were going for. I understand why it comes off that way. And I really think that it has a lot to do with understanding her internal conflict. Also, we really only get one line that establishes the Duke and Jessica's relationship, where he's about to go to sleep the night before the raid, and he says, "I should have married you." We don't get the explanation as to why he didn't marry her, which would have been nice. We don't get the love that they truly share. And also the more tragic thing is we do have the scene where Leto confronts her and he's like, are you betraying me? And she's like, shit, no, you know me. So we get that scene, but we don't get the juxtaposition of that shows how much they do truly love and care for each other. And that's the whole reason that she defied her orders and gave Leto a son when she was ordered to give him daughters, because she loves him and she wanted him to have the son that he wanted. And yeah, that's a whole other thing. Like, it gets kind of glossed over in the book. Yes, Bene Gesserits can control the gender of the child that they're going to have. It's super cool. Who else we got? Josh Brolin is Gurney. Man, he nailed it. I just wish there was more of him. Like, I know that there's a scene that they cut out with him playing the balisette, and that is an absolutely a important part of his character. He's like this troubadour warrior, you know. He's a soldier, but he's also an artist, and I love that. And like, it wouldn't have taken too much more to show that. The other scene with Gurney that I love, this scene is really more about the Sardaukar. Is there's a moment when Gurney, after the battle, like, we don't see in this movie what happens to Gurney and Thiffer after the raid on Arrakeen. But in the book, Thiffer gets kidnapped by the Harkonnens, and he is forced to basically replace Piter, so we'll definitely see that in part 2. But Gurney Halleck gets rescued by a band of Fremen, and they get him to some smugglers and get him off the planet. But on their way to do that, Gurney and this group of Fremen watch some Sardaukars get ambushed by the Fremen. And now the Sardaukars are supposed to be the most fearsome warriors in the universe. They are badasses. They train in the most harsh conditions that you can imagine. And that drives home the point of how shitty life on Arrakis is. Because Arrakis is such a hellhole that the Fremen warriors are even bigger badasses than the Sardaukar. And Gurney is watching these Fremen just kick Sardaukar ass, and he's besides himself. He's like, they can fight they can beat the Sardaukar? How? And the Fremen that he's with are watching the battle, and they're going, yes, our Fremen are stronger than the Sardaukar, but look how well the Sardaukar are doing. That's admirable. They're really good fighters. And that for me is a really great, it's probably one of my favorite scenes in the book, and I was a little upset that it got left out of this movie. Thiffer, I can't remember the actor's name right now off the top of my head, but I thought he was great. And that's another thing about reading the book. I remember saying, like, there's just one too many guys on House Atreides. Like, it would have been really easy to combine Thiffer and Gurney into one character, or combine Duncan and Gurney into one character. So that's something I appreciated about the casting, is that they made Thiffer different enough that you understood the real differences between his character and Gurney's. And they're, you know, Gurney, Duncan, Thiffer, Yue, all of these men are mentors to Paul, but they all have something a little bit different. And I really liked the way that he played it, because you understood that he was a man of analysis and intelligence and honor. So, heading on over to the bad guy side, Piter de Vries, as long as we're talking about Mentats. I can't pronounce his last name, I'm so sorry. But the actor who plays Piter did a great job. I don't mind that all the Harkonnens were bald and they never explained it. Like, you know, in the Lynch film, they were all ginger and they never explained it. So, you know, fair game. But I thought that Piter came off just the way he's described in the book. He's creepy, he's slimy, he's manipulative. I thought that was played really well. And he is that twisted version. He's like the dark version of Thiffer. And it works. So... the Baron Harkonnen. So I like how they did the suspensors. I thought he flew around just a little bit too much. It wasn't as bad as in the Lynch version, where it's really cartoony and he's zipping around all over the place like a blimp. But you know, this version, he was a little more floaty, and I liked that. But it's really not what it's supposed to be. The idea is that this guy is just so fat and so, like, he lives a life of such privilege that, like, his muscles barely work anymore. He can't really move around by himself. So he needs all these, like, hover craft things attached to his body that kind of help him move around. So he doesn't fly in the book. He moves around as a normal person would, but it looks a little unnatural because he's being held up with all these flotation devices. So I thought that they could have made him look a little cooler if they really played into that, like he kind of moves around unnaturally. But other than that, Stellan Skarsgård's performance was fantastic. And he absolutely seems threatening with, like, this cold demeanor, whereas, like, in the Lynch film, he was like a Saturday morning cartoon. I like this version a lot better. And I do think they could have gone more menacing, and that comes back to explaining his hatred of the Atreides and, like, his plans within plans, like him having someone on the inside, but, like, also manipulating things to make people think that it's someone else, you know? So that once again, not a problem with the performance. It's a problem with the editing. Raban, Dave Bautista, like, let's be honest, he didn't have to do much. Bautista looks like a monster. You know, he's a huge dude, and all he really had to do was show up, look scary, and act stupid, and, like, nailed it. Perfect. You know, Raban, some people make a bigger deal out of him than he is. He's really just the Baron's enforcer. My girl. My favorite character from the books, Chani. Zendaya, perfect. I can't really say anything else. I mean, she absolutely, like, in the dream sequences, you know, she's very floaty and airy and smiley, and that's, it's because Paul is literally having dreams of a girl, you know? Like, but when he finally meets her outside of the dream, and she is a real grounded person, and she just like, she's no bullshit. And she's very ride or die, you know? And for her to just come out and say like, hey, you know, white boy, here's a knife. You're probably gonna die, but you know, like, if you die holding my grandma's knife, like, that'd be cool. Just, you know, this dude's a really good fighter. So like, don't worry about being in pain too much because he's gonna make it quick. Like, no nonsense, no bullshit, no pretense. Chaney's awesome, and Zendaya played her perfectly. Like, everybody in the cast, but like, oh, she nailed it. Same thing with Stilgar. I forgot how much I love Stilgar from the books. Like, Fremen are very no nonsense, no buffoonery, and like the way that Javier Bardem portrayed Stilgar is just perfect. He carries himself like a boss. He takes no shit. He's respectful while commanding respect. And he commands respect in the most nonchalant of ways, because he just carries himself with some BDE, if you know what I'm saying. He just walks in, he's like, what's up? This is my deal. We have an agreement. I show you some respect. Peace. Like, no pretense whatsoever in the Fremen culture. I love it. Gaius Helen Mohiam. Damn good. That's, what is her name? Charlotte... Can't remember the actress's name right now, but yeah, she did good. She did really good. She understood the assignment. Same thing with shout out Mapes. Like, Mapes is one of those characters that like lots of people remember fondly, even though she's really not in the book that much. She's in like 3 scenes. Like, she introduces herself to Jessica. Paul saves her from the hunter seeker doohickey. And then she dies. But she's well written, so she's a memorable character, even though she's really only in those 3 scenes. And this performance did her justice. Like, it was well played, and it was just enough of like humble house servant with like wild Fremen mixed in. It was very, very spot on. Like, I really loved the direction they went with her. Dr. Yue, very subdued, and that's to be expected from like a doctor from the Suk school. And it would have been nice if they had broken that down a little bit more, to have like just a little bit more tension with maybe not reveal that he is the traitor right away. Just do something to give him a little bit more tension, because he was very one note up until the demise of Duke Leto. And that's all I have for the cast. Now the biggest thing, hopes for part 2. And the spot where this movie is triumphant is that the people that I have talked to who are not familiar with the book, who are not familiar with the Lynch film, or the miniseries, all like started telling me their theories on what they think is going to happen in part 2, which is really interesting because, you know, if you're a fan of the book, you don't stop at this one spot and go, oh, here's what I think is going to happen next. At least most people don't. You just kind of keep going until you get to the end of the book. Same thing with the Lynch film. The Lynch film brings this part of the story to its conclusion. Here, I can't even call this a cliffhanger. It just stopped. It's the middle point. and it just stopped. Now, slight spoilers, later on in this story, there's a time jump. And it would be very easy to just open this film and say 3 years later and begin with Paul planning out his revenge. I hope that they don't do that. I really hope that this second film opens with an orgy. Because if we can start up straight up with the spice orgy and the water of life, like, that will be exactly the right amount of weird that this film was missing. And it would be such a power move too. It would be almost like Denis going, "Oh yeah, you like that first movie, huh? We hooked you. We got you on the hook. Guess what? Let's throw some weird shit in your face. Here's a fucking orgy. And here's, like, you know, drinking worm bile and turning it into a magic potion." Like, go balls to the wall with the second film. I hope for it so much. I hope that every subsequent Dune film just gets weirder and weirder and more outlandish. Because it can. It has that room to grow and just get bizarre. Get weird with it. Embrace the weird. Just do it. Yeah, obviously some people have theorized that Feyd and Rabban have been combined into one character. I don't see any evidence of that. It doesn't make sense for Feyd to be in this portion of the story other than to show the Baron's sexual preferences, which they avoided, and that was probably a good idea. Anyone who doesn't know, in the book, the Baron is a pedophile. And he has a nephew who is the same age as Paul Atreides. And it's very clearly established that he has some kind of, like, trigger warning. He has some non-consensual fantasies regarding both Paul and his nephew. So once again, it's probably better left out of the film, but yeah, that's a thing. So Feyd is not necessary for this point, and I would love to have Feyd introduced in the second movie as kind of like this, almost like a reverse Paul, you know? In a weird way, Paul and Feyd are foils for each other, kind of like Hamlet and Laertes. Yeah, literature. So another thought off the top of my head, we lost the banquet scene, and I feel like that would really help establish the difference between House Atreides and House Harkonnen and their philosophies as to the people that they rule over. Now that scene in the book is also tied into the water scarcity on Arrakis, but I think it's like we got that with the scene with the palm trees, and that was really well done. But you could have also done the banquet scene, because, and that was a scene that was really well done in the miniseries, and that really drives home why the Baron is despised and Duke Leto is so popular that he's that the Emperor is afraid of his growing power. And in the Lynch film, they chalk this up to, oh, Duke Leto has a big army. That's not the case. It's he has the loyalty and respect of the people that he rules, because Leto's brand of ruling is a little bit socialistic. You know, he's very concerned with making sure that all his people are well taken care of. He serves them, not the other way around. The Baron is gaudy and opulent and shows off his wealth, and the people that he rules over serve him. And that's the two philosophies on leadership that Frank Herbert was trying to establish. Of course, spoilers, when Paul becomes the emperor, it's a different story altogether, because in order to establish the control of the new Imperium that he's leading, he has to send his army out to all these different worlds and squash rebellions to maintain the power structure. So by the time we get to the second book, Paul is perhaps the biggest, because I don't like to use the word greatest in this sense. No, let's go for it. Greatest. Amount-wise, he is the greatest mass murderer in history. And that was kind of Frank Herbert's overall message, is that charismatic leaders, even someone as pure and well-intentioned as Paul, it's not a good thing. And it really makes you think about today's political climate. And you know what? Fuck it. I'll say it. In the current political climate, we have one side that wants to see everybody do better. That's all they want. Policies that help people so that people can do better. The other side, however, is fanatical about one person, one charismatic guy that has captured their attention. And everything else just kind of like, all the actual causes, all the things that are happening are malleable, are interchangeable, really mean nothing. The only thing one particular side cares about is a person, is a guy. The other side actually cares about the people. So I have very high hopes for Dune Part 2. And the cool thing is that the people that I've talked to who haven't read the source material also have very high hopes for Part 2, and they've been coming to me with their theories, and I have to be like, sorry, I can't tell you what happens. You know, I've read the books. Did this film live up to my hope and dream? Not quite. And but that's nothing to hold against it, because it was still damn good. It was well made, well produced, well shot, well written, well cast, well performed. All the special effects were tight. Like, it was damn good. Every aspect was damn good except the editing. So I Warner Brothers, I beg you, please give us an extended cut. Like, that would warm my heart so much. You know, Lord of the Rings did it. In between each theatrical release, they came out with an extended movie version. Even if you have to break up Dune Part 1 into 2 more parts. Imagine that. Imagine we get an extended cut so long that it's Dune Part 1A and Part 1B. That would, man, I'd be in high heaven with that. Now, of course, me personally, I had unrealistically high expectations for this film. And I'm not saying that I'm disappointed. I'm just saying I'm still waiting for the one film that changes the mind of all the world. And sadly, I don't think we'll ever get that. But this would be a perfect time for it. What can I say, man? I'm a dreamer. But I'm not the only one. So, Until next time, folks, the sleeper must awaken.